not only am I thankful and proud of you, but I want to mention this. It's not easy being a single mom and doing it as well as people here, like Francine, Lucy, Monique, and Lisa do, and still go out and try to make a living. It's not easy to raise an autistic son like David Higgins does and go out and try to make a living. And it's one thing to talk about priorities, but it's another thing to have the desire to get out of bed after losing your wife, friend, and companion of 20 plus years, like Todd did this year. And there are situations that I'm not even aware of, from difficulties with your children, to marriage problems, to heavy financial burdens, to health issues. But before I say anything, I want you to know how proud I am of this group. You, ladies and gentlemen, are my heroes. You are men and women of character, integrity, kindness, and compassion. You all carry a load, and I rarely hear you guys complain. You're out there dealing with all kinds of adversities, circumstances, personalities, competitive pricing, drop balls at times by us in our various departments, and you still carry on. Thank you, because you guys are amazing. Now let's talk about priorities. Priority is defined as something or someone that is more urgent or important than other things. Something that is given special attention, first concern, primary issue, most pressing matter. We only have a certain amount of time in the day. There's 24 hours in a day. Listen to this. I don't know how many of you require sleep. I know my partner doesn't require as much as the normal person. I don't know how he does it, but I do. So for you, maybe you average, depending on how young your children are, anywhere from 6 to 7 hours a night of sleep. And then most of you probably work 9 hours a day as an average. We'll use that. So now we're up to 16 hours. Throw in maybe an hour for eating between all 3 meals. So I know you guys eat fast. Little bathing. So how many hours does that leave left a day? Not a whole lot. I want you to look at prioritizing your life as comparable to a budget. How many of you do a budget? That's a pretty good percentage. Maybe about a third of us do a budget. A budget requires a lot of discipline, and what we do is we list all of our expenses, right? And then we list our income, and what's left over we put into savings or to do something pleasurable like a little vacation or something fun, right? And that's similar with priorities. We're going to list the most important parts of our lives and compare them with the time constraints that we all have. It's current and future planning at the same time. And this takes a tremendous amount of thought and time. And this has huge ramifications on our lives, on our future. And a coach sometimes would be a very, very important person to have for us when we look at our life's priorities. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, do we know what our priorities are? Let me tell you what my priorities look like. So I put work 40%. And that includes weekends, evenings, emails, things like that. I put children at 10%. For me, that includes my children and grandchildren, trips that I make with them, everything. My spouse, 15%. Self-care. What do I mean by self-care? I'm talking about taking the time to eat right, maybe prepare healthy foods, exercise, getting physicals, doctor's appointments. Do you realize that one of our employees who I was very, very close friends with missed a physical 1 year? 1 year. And for some of you sitting here, you very rarely, if ever, have gone on a physical. Do you realize when you turn 40 years, you're supposed to have a physical every year? Well, he missed 1 year. Just so happened the following year when he went, they noticed that he had prostate cancer. If he would have gone to his physical that year before like he's supposed to, they would have caught it right away. But because he didn't, it metastasized, and he had to go into very, very extensive chemotherapy and almost died. So self-care is a combination of exercise, eating right, doctor's appointments, physicals. Ron was talking about dentist. All of that has to do with self-care. God, for all of us, regardless of what our faith is, just spending time with our Creator. Maybe time of reflection, time of reading, time of journaling, time in a house of worship, wherever that is. But for me, that brings me tremendous, tremendous inner strength to do many of the things that I do. Helping others. We just had the video up of Johnny and Friends. Being involved, like Dan McCloskey did with that charity organization that he was involved, or the ones that but having something in our lives other than ourself, other than our children, and other than our spouse. We'll call that helping others. And last one is recreation. For me, I love to play golf. That's my favorite form of recreation. And I want you to get away from this concept, because just like there are books on how to cook meals or this or that, golf, yes, is an expensive sport. But you don't have to spend a lot of money to have recreation. Right, Scott? We could surf, there's so many things, hiking, playing basketball, just riding a bicycle. But there's something very, very therapeutic about recreation that we have to do. We have to make time for that in our lives. And just like it's so healing for me when I have time. See, I'm an introvert. I love to be alone. Maybe you know that about me, right? I love to be with people, but I love to be alone. They say the difference between an introvert and an extrovert. An introvert gets his batteries charged when he's alone. An extrovert gets his batteries charged, like Judah or my daughter, when they're with people. When they're with people, they just light up. When I'm alone, I light up. In fact, when I play golf, I play by myself. I go out on a Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm all alone on the golf course. I see the deer, and I'm just in my glory. I love it. And for some of you, it's bike riding or fishing or things like that. But that's a very important ingredient too. So this is what my chart looks like right now. So I want you to take a couple of minutes right now, not what it should be, but be honest, make your own pie, and what does your chart look like? How would you prioritize your life? Honestly, right now. My partner describes success as this: maximizing our opportunities without sacrificing our priorities. I love that definition. Maximizing our opportunities without sacrificing our priorities. One thing I want us to understand when we think about priorities is the seasons of life that we're in. Ron and myself, we're in a season of our life now where it's a little easier because our children are older. But it's very important in determining how much time to devote to each priority. Let me explain to you. When my children were younger, I devoted a large amount of time. Can you go back to my pie for a second? When my children were younger, I devoted a large amount of time to helping others in my church. And if there's anything, if I could do something all over again, I would do that differently. Because I spent an exorbitant amount of time doing that. Working and helping others in my church. I would have, when my children were younger, in that season of my life, I would have rather have spent less time working in my church and more time spending with my children. Seasons of life go hand in hand with time constraints. We have to be very intentional and understand the ramifications of each appropriation that we give. I know certain people, probably in this room right now, who spend extraordinary amounts of time with their children. When it's not work, it's their children. And they spend very little time with their spouse. And what happens is they don't realize this, but when their children get older and leave the house, they have a very, very broken relationship with their spouse, and they have very little in common. What glued them together all those years was their children. They poured tons and tons of time into their children, but very little time into their spouse. And the most important relationship, the most primary and most important relationship, is our spouse. Number one. Before our children. Because our children observe how mom and dad live their lives together. They observe that. And we're modeling for them what it looks like. How to love each other, how to listen to each other, how to deal with each other through life's problems. And that's a very, very sad thing. And a lot of us are getting older now, and we haven't spent the amount of time with our spouse that we should have. Or another example is someone who works so hard, spends hours and hours and hours, makes good money, really good money. But a lot of these other things are neglected, especially self-care, especially helping others. So what I see in my generation, I see men and women who retire from working, have a lot of money, and then they have no identity. They don't know what to do with themselves. They're depressed. Their health is terrible. They didn't take care of themselves. They're not in good shape. And even though they have a lot of money, what good does it do? So I want you to see how these appropriations, how they impact us, just like a budget does, as we go into the future. It's kind of like a 401k. When we're young, we think, we don't need to put money in a 401k. I'll always be strong. My health will always be great. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work that way. We do get older. Our bodies do break down. You can't depend on Social Security. And I'm not trying to make a statement about our government. I'm trying to make a statement that the amount of money for Social Security that you get is just not enough. And by the way, for those who didn't know, Social Security is taxable. It's not net money. You pay taxes on your Social Security. So you put into your 401k, so you're saving for your future. So when you get to be 60, 65, 70 years old, you have something to fall back on rather than be dependent on others. It's planning ahead. It's looking to the future. It's the same thing with understanding and learning how to prioritize our lives. I want us, at the end of the day, to feel good about the decisions that we made. A lot of us are doing that, and I want to honor that. Some of us are very young in here. You have the opportunity to really prioritize well. And others of us in here, it's not too late. It's not too late. Concerning marriage. Down through the years, my wife and I, we always try to go away at least once a year. How many of you, I'm going to ask this question. How many of you go away at least once a year without the kids with your wife? Raise your hand. Or your significant other. That's a pretty good percentage. Actually, I'm happy about that. That's almost half of us. But there's still half of us in this room that don't do that. In fact, I talk to couples sometimes. They haven't gone away alone together in 10 years. And when they do go away, their kids always go along with them. And that's not healthy, based on what I said to you before. So try and spend some time alone with your spouse. It might be awkward at first, especially if you haven't done it in a long time, but you need to. It's very, very important. Plan a date night once a week. How many of us do that? We have a date night once a week with our spouse. Raise your hand. Ooh, that's not too good. That's like a quarter of the people in here. Remember what we're trying to accomplish. And if we do go out with our spouse, you better put this somewhere far away. It's the saddest thing in the world. I go out to a restaurant sometimes, and I look at these couples, and they're just on their cell phones, and they're not even talking to each other. It's so discouraging. It's so sad that they're not building relationship. I'll tell you, listen to this. Relationship, like Judah was talking about today, relationship requires a tremendous amount of discipline. When I come home sometimes, I am so tired of talking all day. And I sit down to eat, and my wife says to me, "Tell me about your day." And I go to myself, I don't want to tell. I don't have anything left. I'm talked out. But you know what? I know how important it is for her to know about my day. So even though I'm exhausted and I don't want to tell her because I'm tired, I decide in myself, I'm going to talk to her. I want her to know. I want my kids to know. I want my grandkids to know. I want them to understand what's going on in me and what I struggle with so that they could help me. Do you realize this? That my kids, I'm talking about my son and daughter-in-law, my daughter and my son-in-law, are my best friends. They give me the best counsel when I'm going through something of anyone I know. That is one of the most beautiful gifts when your kids get older and you're going through something where your kids will start giving you advice one day. I'm telling you, there's nothing better. You could have that, but it takes discipline. It takes discipline with your spouse. Well, she doesn't ask me about my day. That doesn't matter. I want you to invest in her so she can understand you. So when something's going wrong, she understands what's going on in your heart. That requires a lot of discipline. With our children, how many of you spend time alone with your children, a date time once a week? It's so important. And be present. Listen. Ask questions. My granddaughter, Carly, she sometimes could talk, and I love it. I love it. But she wants me to be present. She wants me to be present. It's not easy to be present, is it? Is it? We get distracted, we look at our phones, we're thinking about all the chores we need to do. But what Judah was saying before about being concerned when you ask someone a question and they answer it, so let's do it with our customers really well and not do it that hot with our spouse or our kids. That's a good formula, right? And that's what we do. We're going to be great at listening with our customers, asking great questions. We talked about our bodies, understanding that our bodies aren't machines. Sometimes we think they are. How many of you exercise 3 times a week? We really, really need it. There's something that happens when we exercise. With the blood flowing through our body, we feel rejuvenated, we think better, we can make better decisions, we have more confidence. There's something about exercise that does that. For our spiritual life, whatever that looks like for you, Ron alludes to this quite frequently, taking time to read, praying, journaling. This has transformed, I want you to understand this, this has transformed my life more than any other thing that I do, is having quiet time to read, to pray, and to journal. And when I journal, what I do is I write down all of the things that I'm going through and feeling. I mean, in detail. I don't leave anything out. It's just between me and God. No one else will ever read this. Just write it all down. There's something powerful about getting the feelings that are deep in here written down. There's also something powerful saying it to someone else. But sometimes that might be too hard. But at least write it down. In the privacy of your life, write it down. Talk to God. Tell him what you're going through, how lonely you feel, how rejected you feel, how painful this is. Write it down. I ask God to speak to me about those things, and then I write down what I believe I hear. Now that might be a little to some of you, but I believe, I have faith that God meets me at those moments. And it brings me a tremendous amount of comfort and strength. and Ron alluded to, going to a place of worship. When I go there once a week, and I'm quiet, you can't bring well, some people do look at their phones, but that's kind of bizarre. But it's a time to reflect, a time to count our blessings. Ron talks about perspective. It teaches us about perspective. And the last thing I wanted to say was giving to others, helping the underprivileged, the poor. Packing food boxes, that's what we're going to do tomorrow night. Counseling someone in need. Sharing God's love in some fashion. I know men and women who have never done this. And when they reach retirement, they have very few meaningful themes in their lives. And they feel depressed and lifeless because their work has come to an end. They've retired. They've gotten their watch. And now they don't know what to do with their life. And it's very sad because there are millions and millions of hurting people out there, and each one of us, God has invested in each one of you a gift, and you have life experience, and you can help so many people. So I just encourage you, whatever it is, to tutor a kid in the inner city, to go and pack food, do something where you're stepping outside of yourself and your family to help someone else. Develop that. So, I'm coming to the end of my talk. You guys have been so gracious. You've listened to so many talks today. But when Ron and I talked about this thing about priorities, the question is that so many times we know about this up here, but how do we get action on this? And I've given you some helpful hints. Ron alluded to talking to someone who is maybe good at this, a coach, sitting down with someone, going over your pie together. If it's about marriage, if it's about children, stepping outside of yourself. Maybe there's some real deep issues that requires a counselor, some deep bitterness or unforgiveness. That may require going to professional counseling, but it's worth it to get that rock that's lodged down there, that's obstructing what needs to flow through our lives. We want to help you. I want to be there for you. We all do. And this is what I've learned some lessons through my life. I shared one with you about my kids. And it wasn't all rosy with me. My son, you knew about. I told you about my son. That's the reason we went to Atlanta. When my son was in the 8th grade, he got involved with gangs. He almost got killed. And he was going downhill real fast. And if we didn't get him out of Los Angeles at the time, he probably would have gotten killed. So that's one of the main reasons we moved to Atlanta, to give him a fresh start. And it took a while before that kicked into motion. So I know you guys are going through stuff. I've talked with many of you. I know you experience a lot. That's why I wanted to start the talk off by saying that. It's not easy. It's not easy making a living, even if there was nothing else on that pie, just work. That's hard enough to do in this environment. It seems like it's getting more and more difficult, not easier. So I understand that. I don't want to take that for granted. I know Ron and I are in a different place. Nevertheless, these are principles that we've learned, and we're still learning, and we're still growing, and we want to share them with each other. But I want you guys to be self-aware and understand what's really going on in your lives. So when you get older, you can avoid some of these pitfalls.